everyone, to Pete Bercich's Week 7 edition of Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and I'm joined by former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach Pete Bercich. I got to tell you, it was another ugly game on the offensive side of the ball for Minnesota last Sunday as the Vikings fell to the Lions at TCF Bank Stadium 17-3 in a game that really was more lopsided than the score. And Pete, I got to ask you, do the Viking players and coaches understand that this isn't golf and the high score actually wins, not the low score?
Yeah, I guess tongue in cheek, I wouldn't want to ask that anywhere in the building. You'd probably get pounded by somebody. But let's just give credit where credit's due. Detroit has a very, very good defense. They're playing at a very, very good level. I think schematically what they're doing is very, very good for the players that they have, and that's kind of the key, I think, period in the NFL, is that you have a scheme that matches up with your specific talents of your players. It was very disappointing, and I think from a big picture standpoint, one of the things that I questioned coming out of that game was just, who's the leader on offense? What leadership do you have on that side of the football? I mean, I go back to my days, and I was fortunate enough to play 7 years, and we never had a losing season. But we had guys like Robert Smith and Randall McDaniel and Chris Carter. Our quarterback was Randall Cunningham, who like Teddy, was kind of a quiet guy. But the rest of those guys, they would not allow something like that to happen. And if it did happen, then it would be, pardon my French, but it'd be hell to pay, in the locker room. And it wouldn't be something that the coaches would have to inflict or pursue or push on. These guys would be doing it themselves. I mean, guys like Jake Reed, I could go on and on. Jeff Christie, these guys had some pride in what they did, and offensively, I think that's missing. So someone needs to step up, some kind of veteran, whether it be Sullivan or Lodehold or Jennings or someone. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is a 21-year-old quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he's just figuring this game out. So let him do that. Let the leadership come from a different angle. I think this offense is going to have to understand is that it's not going to be easy right now for this squad to put up 14 to 21 points a game. They're going to have to work their rear ends off just to be competitive. Now, the league is hard enough. It's competitive enough. I mean, you got to bust your ass every single week. But these guys have to have that in the back of their mind, that they do not have the talent and the firepower to just show up and put 21 points on the board. Mm-hmm. They have to know that they're going to have to dig deep, fight with everything they have week in and week out. I mean, it's a tough thing to come to terms with. It's exhaustive. And they have to figure that out. And I think once they figure that out, then maybe somebody will dig deep and be a leader in that huddle. I mean, I think overall it's a lack of leadership, and I go to that because you look at the 8 sacks that Teddy had, and you look at the causes, and some of them are guys getting beat one-on-one physically. Now that's going to happen. But if you have a guy that can't keep up, then you can replace him. A lot of them are schematic, mental errors on protection. Those things are never, they're inexcusable. You cannot have protection breakdowns, because if a guy's not 100% sure who he has, then 2 people are free. And I saw some of that on Sunday. That has to be taken care of immediately and rectified. And then there were some coverage sacks as well on Teddy. So, and that's something that's going to happen. I mean, the coordinators can adjust routes to coverages and do certain things to help get guys open. But when you're having issues in a number of different areas, schematically, mentally, and then physically, that just tells me that not enough work is getting done, not enough attention to details being paid, and there's a lot of work to be done. And I don't know. Again, I kind of question who's going to be the guy on offense that steps up and teaches reality. I mean, that's what Denny Green always used to say. He's like, my job is to teach reality. My job is to tell you guys what reality is. And sometimes that was a difficult message to take, but he was right. Yeah. And I think the reality of the situation is there are a lot of guys on offense, veteran guys, that have to step up and make each other accountable. Coaches can't make players accountable. They really can't, except at the end of the year when they release and sign people. Players have to make each other accountable. that kind of pressure, the pressure that a John Randall can put on another guy who's not getting it done in the locker room, is a million times heavier on the shoulders than a coach that's on you week in and week out.
You know, it's funny because you talk about needing that leader as a player, and you know, I'm sure it was out of frustration, but Coach Zimmer, after the game, had some pretty pointed remarks about some of the players' commitment to winning. And, you know, for fans at home, Pete, it's pretty hard to tell whether, you know, the wide receivers are really finishing routes. Sometimes it doesn't look like they are. And on your game broadcast this week, you even said it appeared that no one on offense was even jogging to the line of scrimmage except Bridgewater. And I'm curious, do you see any quit from these players? And if so, what can Zimmer do to reverse that problem?
Well, I don't know if I'm gonna go to that level yet. I mean, I don't think this team has rolled over or died, especially defensively. I think that third and long screen that Detroit got to, I think it was like 3rd and 20 that they got to 4th and 1, converted it, and then scored quickly after that. The defense had a little lapse. They made it a little bit too easy. Defensively, they're not giving up. But look at guys on the defense: Linval Joseph, Harrison Smith, Captain Munnerlin. You know, Brian Robinson. I mean, you've got some leadership on that side of the ball. Those guys have pride in their work. I don't think that's an issue. You know, offensively, you know, yeah, there were some situations where guys just weren't open. They have to understand that Teddy, with his legs, can extend plays, and that the play is really never over. So there's some adjustment there, if you will, and guys getting to know each other a little bit better. But you know, overall, I just think that they need to figure it out together as players, more so than have the coaching staff step in and all of a sudden produce a magic formula on a game plan that's going to make them win, because that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because you and I have talked several times about the problems that Matt Khalil's have, but really when you look at it, the entire line, especially this past week, looks like they've never played together before, and I'm curious, why can't a team like that together that's got some continuity, been playing together, why can't they pass block?
Well, that's a really good question, and then I think I kind of spoke to that earlier. It was just what was the breakdown? You know, physically there were some breakdowns. Physically, on one play, I don't know if it was Charlie Johnson. I can't remember if it was Charlie or if it was you know, one of the other linemen that they just flat out got pushed back and tripped. You know, there's going to be some physical mistakes. I mean, Khalil gets beat physically around the end, gives up a sack and a forced fumble. Those kinds of things can happen, and if they happen too much, then the only way to address it is to find somebody else. The rest of those problems, though, as far as schematics go, as far as attention to detail and routes getting open, those are things that can easily be addressed. And like I said, when it's that spread out in those different areas, when you're a coach, you sit down and you go, what do you fix? I mean, how do you fix it? The only way you can fix it is by simplifying the game plan and making these guys do less mentally, which will handicap you in a lot of ways. But if you can't hold a big offensive game plan if these guys can't mentally execute what you're trying to call. You know, there's an old saying in coaching that the better your players are, the thinner your playbook. Yeah. Meaning that an ISO or a toss or a linebacker blitzing up the middle. You know, if it's one guy like an Andre Crockett, it's not going to get anything done. But when you blitz Anthony Barr, something might happen. So you're limited from a player standpoint because you're missing Rudolph, because you're missing a number of people, Brandon Fusco. You got to simplify, and you have to just say, you know what? If we're going to get beat, we're going to get beat because we're just overmatched from a talent standpoint. We can't let mental errors be the reason for our losses, and the mental errors turn into turnovers, and it just got worse. I mean, -3 in the turnover ratio, you're not going to win a lot of those football games.
Right. It's funny because you were a coach for the Vikings when Mike Tice had this problem with his team to where all of a sudden they couldn't pass block. And my recollection was he did exactly what you're saying. He simplified. I think he brought in a consultant to try to help him figure out what the problems are, kind of a fresh set of eyes on it. And it seemed to work. So hopefully that's the same ingredient here.
Yeah, Mike, I remember that was more on the defensive side. He had Foge Fazio come in for a while. Foge was one of my defensive coordinators when I played. And, I think it was all that, there's some issues there with ego because some, guys don't want to see their, you don't want to be a coordinator and have to have a consultant come in to solve your problems. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was handled in the right way, the way that only Foge Fazio, God rest his soul, could do it. And offensively, yeah, it was, that's exactly what we did. As Mike said, we are carrying too much offense. We have to simplify. We have to be able to run every play versus every look that we could get. And it worked. It helped.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if we turn to Teddy Bridgewater, still a question about the line for you. Does this give the coaches a little bit more difficult of a challenge to try to analyze how he's performing, how he's growing as a quarterback, if he's constantly running for his life back there?
It does. I mean, football is the last of the true team sports where one or two guys can't, make you or break you. But yeah, it does. I think that the interception on the first drive, it was a situation where he didn't look off the safety and just stared down the receiver, and boom, it was an interception. So those things you can correct and work on. He's a young quarterback. You're going to have your ups and you're going to have your downs. But what you can't have is a guy getting sacked 8 times a game, because physically that's going to take its toll. And then when a quarterback starts getting skittish, and let me tell you, the Lions, Stafford was as disinterested in getting touched as any quarterback I've seen. He talk about being skittish in the pocket. He put anybody in his face, and he wasn't throwing the football. So you can't, you get to that point where the quarterback starts to compromise fundamentals, compromise other things because he's getting hit a lot. Then that's when it becomes very difficult to evaluate a quarterback's performance.
Well, I'll tell you what, I give Bridgewater credit. He did not take his eyes off downfield. He continued to try to extend that play as long as he could. That's still a good sign to me.
It is, and that's the difference between a scrambling quarterback and a guy that I think that's what is going to make it in this league. And by that I mean quarterbacks with longevity. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks in the league that have been around the longest: Drew Brees, a Manning's, Brady's. These guys do not run the football. You know what I mean? In fact, they can barely even run to begin with. So you have to be able to throw the football. For longevity in this league, you've got to be able to throw the football. Look at RG3 and the issues that he's had. Just taking too much of a pounding. Your body cannot hold up to it for 16 games for 10 seasons. It just isn't going to happen. So one of the things I loved about Teddy from the beginning was when he scrambled, he always kept his eyes outfield. He's not a scrambling quarterback. He's a mobile quarterback. Right. And I think that's a subtle but very important difference between the two. I think he's moving to keep a play alive and really only runs when he can or has to. With Ponder, we used to roll him out and give him a run-pass option because that's, you needed him to get some momentum. It always seemed like he played better when he just used his legs and made some plays and he got confidence, and then he started throwing the ball better. Teddy's not that way. I think, Teddy is again, moving to extend plays and keep things alive. And, I think that if we can keep him upright, there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, no doubt. And one of the things I was curious about, when you look at the passing game, it looks like it's gotten really conservative. You don't see any deep shots. Are you surprised that we don't at least see 1.5?
Well, that's the other. I mean, those two go hand in hand. I mean, the other part of it is, the running game is necessary to take pressure off the passing game. And if you can be efficient in the run, you don't have to be explosive. You just have to be efficient, meaning you're getting 4 yards a carry, even a couple plays in a row. You can do that. And the rule of thumb is when you get around midfield, especially after a turnover, but once you approach midfield, that's a great time to run a little play action and throw the ball deep, because worst case scenario is an interception. If there's an interception, it's going to be deep in the other team's territory, so it's just as good as a punt. Right. That's why you see teams around midfield take their shots deep so often. You might get a PI, you might get whatever, and all those things. Everything else really favors you. If it's an incomplete pass, it's a long foul ball, and it loosens up the defensive backs a little bit. So worst case scenario in that situation isn't that bad. But like I said, you have to be able to run, because no one's going to respect the play action if you're not running the football very well. And if you're not protecting and you got mental errors in protection with the running backs, that's even worse, because these play action deep throws requires a quarterback to turn his back on the defense. You see it with Drew Brees all the time. Mm-hmm. When the defensive back can read his number and read his name on the back of his jersey, get deep. Make him throw the check down. Make him throw the outlet, because that's when they're taking the shots deep. And my point, we're not getting deep shots because we're not protecting.
Everybody always focuses on Cordero Patterson and his trouble getting open, but I actually wanted to ask you about our $9 million a year receiver, Greg Jennings. Why are we not getting more production out of him?
That's a very, very good question. We had gotten him the ball with Castle. I think Castle is a very good slant thrower, good on timing routes. I mean, those are the kinds of routes that Jennings really excels at, the run after the catch, those kinds of plays. He's not a vertical deep threat type of a receiver. And so that may take a little time with Teddy and him to get that together. But don't forget, I mean, you brought him in to be a complement to, a couple other receivers that you had at the time. And, those guys are either not healthy or are off the team. So his role went from, a nice number 2 option type guy, a possession type receiver, if you will, to now he's kind of the guy. I mean, he's the veteran. And, I don't know if his route tree is big enough to be that guy, to be the veteran. But again, it's one thing again makes things worse, and that's why if you have a guy who's a bit of a role player, you got to be careful.
Yeah. As we kind of look forward, a few weeks ago, fans looked at the game this week against the Buffalo Bills and said, hey, it's a game we should win. But, the Bills do have veteran quarterback Kyle Orton leading the offense, and they've got a decent defense, and they're playing at homes. And, Pete, you've seen Kyle Orton many times in Chicago and Denver and Dallas. What does the defense need to do to contain Orton and the Bills' passing offense this weekend?
Well, one thing that with Orton, you're not going to have a mobile quarterback. You're going to have a guy that's going to sit in the pocket. He's going to be a decent decision maker. So you're going to have to just contain him, keep him in the pocket, pressure him in the pocket. He's really nice relationship with his tight end Chandler, up and down the field. That's kind of his comfort zone. You look at what New England did to him with a lot of different man-to-man type things, and I think they had a couple pretty good answers for it. Unfortunately, their defense couldn't keep up with the passing game in New England. I mean, they're a very, very good run defense. They're similar to Detroit, but maybe not as good as Detroit has been doing this year. I mean, they're very solid up front. They're only giving up on average 60-some yards a game on defense on the ground. So they're very solid up front in the front seven. You have to take it through the air, and that's going to be the tricky part. But for Orton, pressure him, hit him. He's an older guy, good decision maker, so that means disguise is going to have to be very important. And, go from there. They have, Fred Jackson's a talented running back. C.J. Spiller is an unbelievable talent, but just for whatever reason doesn't want to run the ball where it's supposed to go. He's always wanting to bounce things outside and ends up turning around and biting him in the rear end. But, he's an unbelievably gifted running back, and you got to be careful with him. And if he ever learned to run north and south instead of bouncing everything outside, I think he could be very, very dangerous.
Well, obviously you've seen some tape on the Bills a couple times, and I'm interested in your thoughts on how this offense in Minnesota can get on track this weekend. And I'm going to give you a frightening stat: 18 of the last 31 Viking drives on offense in the last 2 weeks have ended either in 3-and-outs or a turnover. How do we reverse that trend?
Well, first thing to do is get rid of the turnovers. Yeah, I mean, we have to find a way to move the ball through the air. I mean, 3 passing touchdowns this far into the season is absolutely unacceptable in this day and age. It's not, it's not as if we have 3 passing touchdowns and, 8 or 9 rushing touchdowns. I mean, they have to find a way to be efficient through the air. And right now they're just not. I mean, Kyle Rudolph would be a good addition, but of course he's injured, so you're missing him. So, what do you do? I mean, who do you throw to? Is Patterson 100%? I mean, if he's not a big of a threat, then then all the attention's paid to Jennings, and boom, here we go. I mean, this is a time for a guy like for one of the other receivers to step up and really have an opportunity to do some good things. But I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question to answer, because the passing game can't go from 0 to explosive overnight. You got to get some kind of rhythm and take your shots when you get a chance, and that's really about it. I mean, these turnovers have to end. I think if you just eliminate the turnovers, you're going to have longer drives. Third down was an issue last week. It's been an issue. Fortunately, the defense has turned it around, so Detroit did not do very well on third down either. But when neither team can convert third downs on offense, then you get a lot of punts. It's got to be 50% on offense and then 30% on defense, and then now you're getting some extended drives, and now you're moving the football and you're doing better.
we haven't talked about it for a couple of weeks, Pete. Kind of a little bit different thing is, Adrian Peterson's trial is now scheduled to start on December 1st. In your opinion, do you think we will ever see him again on the field, either this season or ever, with the Minnesota Vikings?
With the Vikings, I think every day that goes by, I think it's less and less likely that, that we'll see him in purple again. You look at the way the season's gone, and let's just say if nothing legally happens to him or anything like that, I mean, the pictures are out and people have some opinion in their mind already as to what they feel and think about him. But either way, here's a guy who has missed or will miss 15 regular season games this year. Mm-hmm. And when you take that much time off, especially later on in your career, if he does come back, will he be the same guy? I've told myself many times, don't ever put a limit on what that guy can do, because he's surprised me in so many ways physically, coming back from the knee, his ability to run and break big plays. And just when you think he doesn't have an ounce of left in the tank, he's breaking a 70-yard run or 60-yard run or whatever. But I don't think his I just don't, like I said, every day that goes by, I think it's less and less likely he'll be back with the purple.
All right. Well, I got to ask you a broadcasting question. I know you were in the booth on Sunday, but did you hear what happened with the Fox announcer they had who filled in, Mike Goldberg?
You're a little familiar with it. Do expound, please.
Sure. Well, during the game, they brought him in. He's from Ultimate Fighting Championship fame, and they had to bring him in because they put the announcers on Fox on the baseball games. And at one point, he identified Greg Jennings as Golden Tate, and he also had us as a first down on the 59-yard line of the line. So it was kind of an uneven process for him. But the biggest mistake he made was fans kind of got on him on Twitter, and then he bounced back at the naysayers with a bunch of F-bombs and calling fans douchebags. So really wasn't probably the best remark, and Fox just fired him from the broadcast. So it made me wonder, from your perspective, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made on the air, and have you ever gone on one of these profanity-laced tirades on Twitter?
No, that I haven't done. At least on the Twitter side. I've had some mistakes with calling people the wrong names, or talking about a guy in pregame that wasn't going to dress that day. And, when you make mistakes like that, as hard as it is, and as frustrating as it is, you have to just kind of make light of it and, and have to try to have some fun with it. One thing that I do mention all the time is when I first started broadcasting about 7-8 years ago, one of the things that, my counterpart Paul Allen is big on, and the producer Chad Abbott, is making sure that you pronounce the names correctly, whether it's Urlacher or Urlacher. There's a lot of little bitty things, and that's just in the business. That's part of being professional. I mean, that's just part of that aspect, or that I guess that job is, if you want to be in that realm and call games and be a play-by-play or an analyst. One thing for sure you have to do is, pronounce names correctly and identify people correctly. And when you don't do that, things like this can happen. Now, whether or not he wanted to make this his career the rest of his life, I don't know. Maybe he saw it as an opportunity to get his name out there and become popular, because a lot of people have heard his name and know who he is now because of what happened. That was the goal, and, he was successful at it. But, there's these guys that are so good at calling these games. They work very, very hard, and they make it look easy. And so a lot of folks think that if they got a chance to jump in there, that they could do it and they could make it look and sound that easy, and it just isn't. It's difficult. It takes some time. Yeah, you're going to make some mistakes along the way, but when you do, you just got to kind of, chuckle and, move on. And in this case, he decided not to. And I think maybe it was calculated. I don't know.
Well, I got to tell you, we're not making it easier with guys' names like Indomitian or I Am Adejo.
No, you're not. I mean, and I remember I was talking to somebody who called a game for the University of Utah, and he was saying that it was. Oh, actually, it was the guy from the Detroit Lions radio network. He also does the calls the games for the University of Michigan, and they had played the University of Utah. And he said that there were just some names on that list that were, to the college. You have 90 guys that could possibly get in the game. Just He said it was just crazy. And but he got through it and he got it done. But that's, I'll say this: if that's as bad as this job can get, it's still the best job on the planet. Really. I mean, just pronouncing names right. I mean, seriously, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to do what I do and call games, and I enjoy it. It's frustrating at times, yes. You put in a lot of emotional sweat and equity, and to not come up as a winner all the time is frustrating, absolutely. But again, when I take a step back and look what I get to do and see the people I get to meet, I'm very, very fortunate.
Well, I got to tell you, now that you've got such a good attitude about it, as soon as you make a mistake, we're bringing the F-bombs to your Twitter. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, when I make a mistake, you hear it. I mean, that's that's the other great thing, well, maybe that's not so great thing about Twitter, is if you do make a mistake or say something, you are notified immediately via Twitter that you screwed something up. So, whatever.
Well,
you just move on.
Yeah,
right? Move on.
Absolutely. Well, before we conclude this edition of Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call, I have to ask you if you plan to take PA out to the Anchor Bar in upstate New York on Saturday to get some of the original home of the chicken wings.
We were there last time we were in Buffalo. I think it was two years ago in the preseason. We did visit the Anchor Bar. So,
was it worth it?
Well, yeah, it was very, very good. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those places where when you hear all these expectations and you hear all this, can it ever meet or exceed, what your expectations are when you go in? Yeah, it was, they were good. They were very good. And it's, Buffalo, as far as Buffalo wings go, they were very, very good. And it's a really neat place, for a number of reasons. The ambiance is just there. But as far as being a social coordinator on these road trips, that I do not do. I just kind of follow the crowd. We have plenty of guys that, determine where we go and what we do. And I just kind of jump in the cab with them and off we go. So if we go back to the Anchor Bar, I'm in. I'll go. No question about it.
Damn, I got to tell you, Pete, it sounds like you're more like a dog going in the car for a ride. You're just going along.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. That's exactly right.
Well, with that, we say so long until next week. And so for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. Enjoy the game on Sunday, everyone.